Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome back to your Linux and open source news show. This week we've got the release of the Plasma 6.4 beta with a lot of really nice improvements. We also have some big changes coming to web search engines because Microsoft announced they would stop providing their Bing Search API, which is powering a lot of alternative search engines out there, but also we have a brand new index developed in the EU that will be useful for these search engines and might actually be a better option. We also have the US Copyright Office stating that what AI tools do can't really be categorized as fair use, and we've got a lot of other Linux and open source related stuff. And we also have this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareSpace, your all-in-one platform to create, publish, and manage your own website. Squarespace has really easy tools to make sure that anyone can end up with a nice-looking, well-optimized website, no matter if they know how to code or not. They have what they call their blueprint system, which lets you pick from a variety of templates that are pre-built, and they will suit any type of website you want, whether it's a simple blog, an online store, a video platform, whatever. All these templates are also optimized to give you solid SEO, and they also give you SEO tools to keep optimizing the website and to make sure that you don't end up at the very last page of Google search results. On top of that, to go further, Squarespace has their own design engine to create your own pages. You can just drag and drop elements where you want them, and you can change the colors, the fonts, and tweak the template however you want. And once you have something you like, you can add extra features, like creating your own online shop, complete with a payment system. You can design your own logo from Squarespace, or you can even book your own domain name. So check out squarespace.com/the Linux experiment, or just click the link in the description and you'll get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. So, Plasma 6.4 has a beta. The final release is still planned for June, and you can obviously expect a dedicated video about that on the channel, but you can already sample the new things it adds in that beta, and there's a lot here. First, they're splitting Kwin between its X11 version and the Wayland version, so the code can move forward without too much baggage. And it also makes it clear that the X11 version is now a separate project. It will see support until Plasma 7, so there's still a lot of time to use KDE on X11, but it also kind of marks the end of the support for that thing, at least with a deadline in the future. Aurora is also added to Plasma 6.4, and it's a theme engine to theme Kwin window decorations using SVG and QML. You can also expect a bunch of changes to file transfers and KIO, which is the framework that KDE uses to display file-related stuff. So all the nice little dialogues that you see when creating a folder, when moving things around, they're getting a big revamp and they look pretty good. Also, the system will no longer suspend when you have file operations running, and when you're dragging and dropping files and folders inside of Dolphin, you will now have a preference to say that you automatically want to move these files instead of having the choice to move them or copy them if that's the operation you always select. On top of that, newly installed apps will be highlighted in the main KDE menu. The system monitor will be able to group background services in its own page. Screen mirroring should work better on Wayland because it now recognizes the differences in aspect ratio between the displays that you have plugged in. There's also support for the session restore protocol on Wayland, meaning you will be able to have at least initial support for restoring your windows to their size and positions, and the clipboard portal is also supported. Kwin also added the first in, first out Wayland protocol for better performance, notably on Vulkan-related stuff. The menu editor got some interface changes, and you will now be able to remove window frames and title bars from specific windows by just using their taskbar context menu. And you can also expect a bunch of smaller UI-related changes and bug fixes. As always, KDE moves at breakneck speeds. I am a KDE user myself, so it's always super nice to see all these improvements that I will get my hands on in about a month. Hopefully this version is stable and works well. I have had a pretty solid experience with the recent Plasma releases. It's definitely not as buggy as it once was back in the KDE 5 days, so hopefully they can keep that trend going. Now, Microsoft is kind of shaking up the search engine landscape recently because they've announced that they would close down access to Bing search data. This is something that was used by a lot of alternative search engines to provide their search results or to supplement their own indexes with Bing search results. A few of those alternative search engines had moved away from this API because Microsoft had jacked up the prices ever since they had added some AI-related results. But this thing is now going to be fully shuttered on August 11. It is apparently a complete surprise for a lot of developers, and it really doesn't leave a lot of time for most customers to turn around and move to something else. I'm thinking about the likes of Ecosia, who mostly relied on Bing data for a long while and supplemented that with Google search data, but other search engines also used Bing as part of their results, like DuckDuckGo, Quant, and a bunch of others that I had never heard of. There's also Yahoo, who is a client of these APIs. And instead of using this specific API, Microsoft is directing customers towards their AI chatbot API, which provides an AI-generated response supplemented by real-time web data. But this alternative is apparently viewed by developers as really insufficient because it provides summaries and not a real list of results, which is what you would like to offer if you are a search engine. And you might think those lazy search engines could just develop their own index and stop relying on Microsoft, but the truth of the matter is, it's really hard to develop a competent index and then a competent search engine on top of that. A lot of search engines have tried to do so. Ecosia is working on their own, Quant is working on their own, but so far, the only one that is independent and has achieved some kind of success is Brave, and even there, the results of Brave Search, I would not say they are as high quality as you could get on Google or even Bing, even though Google and Bing are really not great these days. They're actually getting worse and worse. The truth is you need a lot of investment to have a really solid, complete index and a good search engine to make use of that index, and not a lot of providers are able to do so. But there is hope, because while those search engines are getting worse and worse, there's actually a solution. It's the Open Web Search project. They've been building a new index for search engines over the past 2.5 years, and that index will go public in June. The approach is interesting. It's an EU-based project with more than 8 million euros in funding from the EU, but it's not controlled by the EU. As far as I could tell, it's controlled by a German organization. And it will be open to individuals and organizations to build their search engines with it or to build AI-related tools as well, with a general research license, which I would assume is for non-profit, non-commercial operations, or a commercial license depending on your needs. They started the project because all major engines are either US-based or Russia-based right now, and it obviously comes with some amount of gatekeeping from the big tech companies that run those engines, as we've seen with Bing shutting down their APIs, but also with some political baggage. And if you don't want to be beholden to the various laws or the various censorship efforts that the US might be doing, well, you kind of have to have something on your own if you're the EU. So they created their own index. They will have a kickoff event on June 6th, which anyone can register to attend. It is a 2-hour-long Zoom call that will explain the project in more detail, how you can access it, what it does and what it doesn't do, and the differences between licenses. This is definitely perfect timing for a lot of search engines. Hopefully that index is really complete and covers everything that people might want to find on the web, and hopefully you don't have to append Reddit at the end of every search to actually get good results like you kind of have to do when you're using Google these days. Now, this doesn't mean that this will be a problem solver 100% silver bullet for every search engine. It is still something that is run and funded by the EU, so there might be some constraints there, and obviously it is the first public version, so there might be problems with it, but I'm excited to see what search engines will be able to do when using that index. It at least opens one more door for these engines to get good results and not be too tied to Google or Microsoft. Now, as Windows 10 is going the way of the dodo, a campaign is organizing to help people find suitable alternatives, as in moving to Linux, basically. This campaign is called End of 10, and it's a collective effort to make people realize that their computers aren't obsolete. They can still function perfectly with a suitable operating system like Linux. This initiative is supported by GNOME and KDE, by the Free Software Foundation Europe, by Debian, and a bunch of others, and it has a few main goals. First, to empower users by helping them transition to Linux. Second, to increase the lifespan of computers that cannot officially migrate to Windows 11. Maybe they don't have the TPM2 chip, maybe they don't fit the system requirements. You can bypass those, but a lot of people will just see that Windows 11 refuses to install and will stop at that, and might want to replace their computers entirely when they would be in perfect working condition if they ran Linux. Third, the goal is to create more community engagement, to let users get hands-on support in local cafes, repair shops, and more. If you're an organization or a business, you can actually sign up as a repair collective to be listed on the website of the campaign, and thus other Linux users or new Linux users that might want to find some help can find your business and go there where you can help them. It also exposes a few of the advantages of Linux, as in it's cheaper, it has no ads or spyware, at least in 99.9% of distros, community support is excellent, and you control your software and your hardware. It's not the company that makes the OS that has all the control on your device. Now, it is an interesting campaign. I'm not sure it will get enough visibility towards the many hundreds of millions of Windows 10 users that might just think their PC is dead now, but if it even helps a few hundred or a few thousand people migrate to Linux and experience the joy of free software and Linux, then I think it will be a success, and I think that's pretty cool. Ubuntu shared a roadmap for their future release, 25.10, and there are some interesting things that they want to focus on. First is improving the NVIDIA Wayland experience on GNOME, which will obviously be GNOME 49 in this version of the distro. There are no specific details on what they want to improve, but they're apparently working with both GNOME and NVIDIA to make sure that things are as solid as can be. And it's really nice because while I don't personally experience issues with Wayland, KDE in my case, and NVIDIA, a lot of people are apparently still having trouble. Second is supporting a full desktop session on RISC-V PCs, complete with support for Firefox and Thunderbird. Variable refresh rate support is also stated for inclusion, not as an experimental feature in GNOME, but as a default, accessible option right off the bat. Their permission system for snaps will also see more work to not prompt the user as much, and also setting better defaults and better integrating with GNOME. They also want to change how users access the documentation, presumably with more direct links to it and better help pages. And of course, they will ship GNOME 49 with Tuxedo as the new terminal emulator. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. And the Loop image viewer is also listed there, although I could swear they already had that because it's been a core GNOME app for 2 or 3 GNOME versions now. This is some interesting stuff, and it also showcases why Ubuntu is still an important project for the Linux desktop. It still has a really sizable user base, and this gives them a lot of clout and some potential manpower to help or at least guide upstream projects towards what Ubuntu wants to accomplish, which fortunately in this case is also helping the general Linux desktop and helping the general GNOME experience. So when those two coincide, it's really nice. Now the snap improvements are take it or leave it. If you use snaps and you don't mind them, it's great to have a better permission system, but if you don't use them, then you probably won't care at all. Now we have some interesting changes on the AI and fair use front, because the US Copyright Office just published a report indicating that they don't really consider what AI companies do to be fair use, as in the massive, gigantic scale pilfering of public open data without respecting any of the licenses. The report says that they can't judge any specific use case or any company right now, and they say that various uses of copyrighted works by AI tools can be considered transformative. But they say that the extent to which it is fair use really depends on the source of the training data, the purpose of the AI tool, and the controls that the user has on the outputs. They also say that making commercial use of big stacks of copyrighted works to produce content that competes with the original works goes way beyond what fair use is meant to allow, especially when this is accomplished through illegal access, likely referencing here the many companies who just downloaded illegal copies of movies, shows, books, and other works. They say, for example, that using these works to train a moderation algorithm makes that use transformative. You don't use the algorithm to educate like the potential source material would try to do. But in the case where these copyrighted works are used to create new similar outputs, so other books or other movies, it isn't transformative and thus it's likely not fair use. They also put to rest the "it's like a human learning" argument, which has always been utterly misguided because no human can digest the same amount of content as fast and reproduce derivative works by the thousands in the span of a day. The US Copyright Office thus states that they don't agree that AI training is inherently transformative because it would be like human learning, because it's not like human learning. It never was. The scale and the way it learns is entirely different, and the way it produces alternative works is entirely different as well. That argument never really held any water. The main issue is, right after publishing these reports, the US government fired the head of the US Copyright Office because the current US government is very, very pro-AI, and so maybe this will not amount to anything and the US Copyright Office will never pursue any changes or anything related to that, because I'm sure the new head of the office will very likely be much in favor of AI, because it's likely to be replaced if he's not. Now, you might remember the Orion browser. This is a browser that already exists on macOS, but that is stated to come to Linux using WebKit, not Chromium, not the Firefox engine. It's built by the developers of the Kagi search engine. They shared a work-in-progress image of that browser, and it turns out it's using GTK4 and libadwaita, meaning it will obviously look more at home in GNOME than on other desktops. It is not a big surprise. The options on Linux are to either make a UI that is fully yours and try to provide some amount of customization to integrate the browser a little bit with most Linux desktops, or you have GTK4 and libadwaita, which I would argue is the most coherent and complete platform out there. You could also try building it with the KDE frameworks and Qt, but as far as I can tell, this platform is not as easy to get into as GTK4 and libadwaita. Most application developers these days build applications with this same foundation, but for projects made by actual companies, it is a first, so it's not a bad endorsement of the work GNOME developers have done. This might also be because the browser uses WebKit, and right now on Linux, the easiest way to implement that is through WebKit GTK. It already has a bunch of lower level stuff in place, the rendering framework is already complete, so maybe it just saves a little bit of time. Still, it's nice to see that we at least have one development platform that a company can adopt and make something relatively quickly, because they announced that Linux version a few months ago tops, and already having a sort of looking like it's functional UI using GTK4 and rendering web pages isn't a bad thing to have done in the span of a couple of months, unless they had already started working on that for 2 years before they announced it, which might be the case. Anyway, this browser will unfortunately not be completely open source. They say they would open source some components and they want to open source it fully in the future, but they haven't done that completely with their search engine either, so I don't really know if that's really the plan or not. Now this week, Valve announced the SteamOS compatibility rating. Not the Steam Deck compatibility rating, but the SteamOS ratings. You know about the Steam Deck one, it ranks games into verified for the games that play really well on the Steam Deck, the playable rating for games that run but might have small issues like small text or a launcher that doesn't work with a controller, and of course the dreaded unsupported rating that means the game just doesn't work properly, either for performance reasons or because an anti-cheat solution prevents the game from working. Now, as SteamOS is expanding outside of the Steam Deck, they also expanded the rating system as well for games that run on SteamOS-powered devices but not on a Steam Deck. It doesn't replace the Steam Deck rating. If you game on a deck and look at games in the Steam store, you will see the deck ratings, but on other devices you will see the SteamOS ones. I would expect all games that run on the Steam Deck to be rated as working on SteamOS. That's about 18,000 games, but it's likely to be a bit better than that as well, because some games marked as unplayable for the deck might run well on another device if the issue was mostly performance or compatibility with a controller. That SteamOS rating system only has 2 tiers: compatible and unsupported. There's no playable tier here because I would assume all playable titles on deck will be marked as compatible, because if you don't really take into account the screen size or the performance or the controller compatibility, all those playable games just run fine on Linux. Now, of course, that rating program is not perfect. It is done without really the involvement of the game's developers. It's just Valve stamping the game at the moment they reviewed it. And of course, if the game developers add a different anti-cheat solution or update the game, it could break how well it works on SteamOS or Steam Deck or Linux in general. So it's not a perfect rating system. You could buy a game and have it not work the next day, even though it was marked as verified. Not fantastic, but it's the best we currently have, and seeing that expanded to all the devices that will run SteamOS is, I think, pretty cool. So this will conclude this episode. I'll leave you on this message from our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. You know about them by now. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed, which means that all the hardware that is inside is actually very Linux compatible. It's kind of the point. I personally only use Tuxedo Computers these days. Everything that you hear or watch from me is done on one of their laptops. All my gaming needs are served by one of their desktops called the Tuxedo Cube, and they have a big range of computers. You can customize the internals. You have plenty of choices for CPUs or for GPUs. You can change the keyboard layout, including your own keyboard layout on your own laptop. You can have your own logo engraved on the lid. They're just really solid devices. They are based in Germany, but they ship to a lot of countries in the world. As always, the link is in the description. Check them out if you need a new computer and you want to make sure that Linux runs really well on it. Okay, so thanks for watching and or listening. You know what to do with the usual YouTube buttons and comment sections. The more you click those and write comments, the better the channel is doing and the more videos I can make. If you want to support the show, there are plenty of links in the description. And in the meantime, well, I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!